Hello and welcome to Neurology Made Easy. I hope you all are doing good. Today, the topic we are going to discuss is basal ganglia, and I have tried to make it very simple to understand for all of you. So, the outline of today's video is that first we will discuss some important structures. Later on, after that, we will discuss the function of the basal ganglia. Next, we will discuss the pathways, direct, indirect, and nigrostriatal pathways, and I will also tell you some mnemonics so that you can remember these. And in the last, I will tell you some important points that are important clinically. So, let's begin. So, first, we will start with the structures that are important. Basically, basal ganglia comprises of caudate nucleus, lentiform nucleus, that is basically the putamen and the globus pallidus. It also comprises of subthalamic nucleus, substantia nigra, and ventral tegmental nucleus. So in this diagram, I have made this as a ventricle for reference, and beside this ventricle, these are the two thalami. Then I am going to show you the caudate nucleus. Basically, the caudate nucleus and putamen together are called striatum. These are the caudate nucleus bilateral. So caudate along with putamen is called striatum, and the putamen and the globus pallidus, they are together called as lentiform nucleus. So the globus pallidus I am drawing in red color. So globus pallidus has two parts, one external part and one is internal part. These are the subthalamic nuclei. Below these I am drawing substantia nigra. You know, substantia nigra is in the midbrain and it has two parts, zona compacta and zona reticulata. And below I am showing ventral tegmental nuclei. So I'm just highlighting these: thalamus, ventricle, caudate, globus pallidus, putamen, subthalamus, substantia nigra, and ventral. Substantia nigra has two parts. I told you that it has two parts, zona compacta and zona reticulata. And we have ventral tegmental nucleus. So once you have grip over the structures, then you can easily understand the pathways that I am going to tell you shortly. So first we will start. First I will tell you about the functions. What does basal ganglia do? So basal ganglia is basically responsible for the initiation or the increase in the motor movements. So either they initiate or they facilitate the motor movements. Then they also have role in stopping the movement or reducing the movement. The third point is that they also have role in modulation of the movements. So the three pathways, direct pathway, basically it is responsible for the first step, the initiation or facilitation. Indirect responsible for stopping or reducing, and the nigrostriatal pathway has a role in modulation of the movements. So now we will see how it all happens. So the first pathway is the direct pathway. I have tried to make it very simple because I myself have read it many times, but each time I used to forget it. So now I have tried to make it quite simple. Hopefully you will also remember it. So the first is the first structure I have shown, cortex, and now I am drawing the caudate, putamen, and the globus pallidus. Here I am drawing thalamus because thalamus has important role in these pathways. So what happens that we have this so we have these signals from the cortex to the caudate and the putamen. Here these neurons release glutamate. Glutamate, you all know, is the excitatory neurotransmitter. From these two structures, later on this goes to the globus pallidus internus. So they together go to the globus pallidus internus, and here there is release of GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Next, the signal goes to the to the thalamus. Here we also have a thalamus. We also have release of GABA. So which is a inhibitory neurotransmitter, and eventually this pathway ends at the cortex again. So now I will explain how it happens. First of all, I told you that the signal comes from the cortex and there is a release of glutamate, and glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter. So what happens that due to release of glutamate, the next step is release of GABA. So increased glutamate causes increased release of GABA, and when there will be increased release of GABA, there will be more negative sign, and this more negative will cause later on reduced secretion of GABA at thalamus. So eventually release of thalamus at GABA will be reduced, and the overall effect will be that there will be positive feedback to the cortex, and hence the movement will be facilitated or increased. So you can remember this, that from cortex to the caudate and putamen is positive. Then later on we have GABA release at two places, and eventually we have positive response at the end. So the next is the indirect pathway. In the indirect pathway, we again have the cortex, the caudate and the putamen, along with globus pallidus, internus and externus. I have drawn it a little bit larger so that you can understand it. This is our thalamus, and below is the subthalamus. So we have the subthalamus. So in the indirect pathway, signal again comes from the cortex to the caudate and the putamen. Here again there is release of glutamate, the excitatory neurotransmitter. But instead of going to the globus pallidus internus, it first goes to the globus pallidus externus. So this goes to the globus pallidus externus, and here there is release of GABA. From there, it moves to the subthalamus. Here again, at the subthalamus, we have GABA, release of GABA. Then it goes to globus pallidus internus. Here we have glutamate release. From there, this pathway goes to the thalamus. Here we have GABA, and again it goes back to the cortex. So now I will explain what is happening here. So from cortex we have positive sign, that is glutamate. There is release of GABA. So increased positive sign will result in increased GABA release from this globus pallidus externus. This increase GABA will cause more inhibition. More inhibition will cause reduced GABA release from the subthalamus. So more negative sign will inhibit it, and there will be reduced GABA release from the subthalamus. So when there will be reduced GABA release from the subthalamus, there will be a reduced inhibition. There will be reduced inhibition. Yes, reduced GABA will cause reduced inhibition, and hence there will be more glutamate release at the globus pallidus internus. This more glutamate will again cause the increase signal that as is excitatory, so there will be more GABA release at the thalamus. This more GABA will eventually result in negative feedback. It is a bit complex and difficult to understand, but once you remember the neurotransmitter, it will be easy for you to remember that what is happening in this pathway. So the next pathway is Nigrastriatal Pathway. It has basically two types of receptor, DR1 and DR2. The neurotransmitter is the dopamine receptor. The DR1 actually acts on the direct pathway and DR2 acts on the indirect pathway. It results in the modulation of the movements. I will tell you an example of Parkinson's disease. In case of Parkinson's disease, we have dopamine depletion. So both of these pathways will be affected. When DR1 affects the direct pathway, so the wanted movements will be reduced and hence there will be bradykinesia. And uh, there will be problem with the DR2, there will be unwanted movement such as tremors. So basically, nigrostriatal pathway has role in modulation of movement. It increases the wanted movements through the direct pathway and it reduces the unwanted movements through the indirect pathway. And in Parkinson's disease, we have discussed because of dopamine depletion, both of these pathways are affected, and hence we have bradykinesia and tremors because of the problem in both of these. So next are here comes the mnemonics. Cinnamon candy great in taste. Cinnamon for the cortex, candy for caudate and putamen, great globus pallidus internus, great in and T for thalamus. The next is cinnamon candy, great energy and super great in taste. Cortex, caudate putamen, globus pallidus externus, subthalamus, globus pallidus internus, then thalamus. And then it, from thalamus signal goes to the cortex again. So these are the mnemonics to remember these pathway, and it's not necessary to remember these, but some people to like to learn with mnemonics. Last point is clinical significance. When there is problem with the direct pathway, there will be hypokinesia such as bradykinesia, and when there will be problem with indirect pathway, there will be hyperkinesia such as chorea, bilismus, tremors, hyperkinetic movements. And in case of Parkinson's disease, I have told you due to dopamine depletion, they both of these occur. Uh, like this video, please subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you.